That one's on.
Let's say it's actually
No. So the point is that we're
We good?
Yeah, very deliberate.
that's what it
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the October 21st, 2019 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery is absent. Commissioner Roth? Here. Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Commissioner Willoughby? Here. Commissioner Beanhoff is absent. Commissioner Busby is here. Commissioner Wise? Here. Commissioner Braley? Here. Commissioner Smith is absent. Commissioner Bingham? Commissioner Nunnick? Thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 1 through 6 are listed under the consent items agenda. Unless there is a request to remove an item from the consent agenda, the items will be approved in one motion. is a request to remove any items from the consent agenda. I have one, and that happens to be item 1, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda? Commissioner Peterson?
I move that we approve the consent agenda minus item number 1 as presented by staff.
Is there a second? Commissioner Nanick?
Second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda per staff recommendations absent of item number 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. There's a part in the comments section of the minutes that I would like to address. It happens to be on page 49, if you're looking in your playbook the same as we are, and it has to do with the fact that there was something that was said in the meeting that is offensive. So, we're going to have to decide up here. I think it should be either redacted or the whole sentence pulled out. So, it's in the first paragraph. I believe Miss Tracy Thomas was talking. And although I'd like not to read it, if I don't read it, then you won't know what I'm referring to. So the one sentence says, you know, in Kansas City, Missouri, you've got what what people in Brookside lovingly called the Blue Jew, the 8-story apartment building at Warnell and Gregory. That's offensive. It shouldn't be said. It shouldn't have been said, and I'm sorry that I didn't catch it at the time it was said. My feeling is that sentence has nothing to do with Shawnee or the project, and therefore it is of no value other than it's offensive and should be taken out of there. I'd like to err on the side of thinking that the speaker made a mistake because we all speak off the cuff. We're not reading stuff up here. So we make mistakes. So I'd like to err on the side of caution and say we won't do any more than ask that that be taken out of the minutes because it's inappropriate. Does the commission have any discussion on that? Commissioner Peterson?
I don't disagree with your statements. I'm wondering if we have the ability to redact something, and I don't know. That would be a staff call or a legal call. I realize it does not have any bearing on what exactly we were talking about. I just don't know if legally we can redact what was said on the record.
I think we'd be better off if we redacted it. That basically means it gets crossed out or just that phrase crossed out, as opposed to taking the whole sentence out. The whole sentence out says we took the whole thing out. And I'm not opposed to that, but you know what? If later on somebody says we shouldn't have done either one, then so be it. But the reality is I don't want it in there because I don't think it reflects good on the city of Shawnee, and it had nothing to do with what the hell we were doing. Does staff have a comment on that?
Many minutes are not word for word. Many cities just do basically an overview of giving the general context. I don't think redacting that from those minutes would sway the council or anything like that in a rezoning decision. They're basically looking at the comment of the public in terms of impact on the surrounding area and those kind of things. So I don't believe pulling one statement out would be contrary to the law. I think that you could do that. I am glad to run that by our city attorney just to make sure that I'm not incorrectly speaking. But I think that's more than within your right to do that if you're of a mind to do so.
So later on, if our attorney said we shouldn't do that, then we won't do it again?
Correct.
That's what I love about Shawnee. It's always, if you do it, just ask for apologies later, but we'll learn on this. So when someone cared to make a motion to accept the minutes as amended? Commissioner Wise?
We'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 7th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting by redacting the statement Chairman Busby mentioned.
Is there a second? Oh, Commissioner Braley, sorry.
Yes, I'll make a second on that.
A motion is second to approve the amended minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on. Z 091910 and FP 131910 Campbell Family Estates at 6120 Clare Road, rezoning and final plat approval. Mark?
Good evening, Mark Zilstorf, City Planning staff. Tonight we'll be conducting a public hearing for consideration of a rezoning and also review and consideration of a final plat for Campbell Family Estates. Subject site is located in western Shawnee at 6120 Clare Road. Property is developed with a single-family home on 5.1 acres. The applicant intends to subdivide the property, preserve the existing home on the site, and construct a new home on the newly created lot. Rezoning and platting of the property is required prior to obtaining a building permit on the new lot. The existing property is zoned agricultural, and as you can, with a request to rezone it to residential suburban RS. As you can see here on the graphic, property to the north, to the west, and to the south are all zoned agricultural. Property to the east across Clare Road is zoned RS residential suburban and developed with the lots in Sylvan Creek Estates. And then to the northeast corner, property is zoned R1, and that will include future phases of the Canyon Lakes single-family residential subdivision. As you can see here on the future land use guide, the area is shown as appropriate for low-density residential development throughout the entire area. This particular plat provides a gross density of 0.4 dwelling units per acre. And while this density is below the low-density range, as defined as 1 to 5 dwelling units per acre, the lots provided in the plat exceed the minimum size requirements of the RS zoning district. And the rezoning and the proposed plat are in general conformance with the comprehensive plan. The rezoning of the property will not have a detrimental effect upon the surrounding area. The city's comprehensive plan, like I said earlier, anticipates continued low-density residential development in the area. And the addition of a single-family home on a large lot is compatible with the development patterns that are established in this area and will not negatively affect the use of this or the surrounding properties. Approval of the request will also not negatively affect the health and welfare of the community. The property will continue to be used for residential purposes. The rezoning of the property and subsequent platting from 1 to 2 lots for the development of 1 additional single-family home will not overburden public service or traffic circulation in the area. As for the final plat consists of 2 lots on 5.1 acres. All bulk requirements for the RS zoning district have been met. Lot 1 contains 2.6 acres with 180 feet of frontage along Clare Road. This Lot 1 is the lot that contains the existing single-family home. The existing home exceeds the minimum setback requirements in the RS zoning district. Lot 2, the lot on the north, contains 2.2 acres and has 154 feet of frontage along Clare Road. Front building setbacks are platted at 35 feet, and both lots exceed the minimum requirements in the residential suburban zoning district. Utilities are available to the site, with the exception of sanitary sewer. The existing home on the site is served by a private individual septic system, as will the newly proposed lot, because public sewers are not available to serve this area at this point. The applicant will obtain a permit for the new septic system from Johnson County prior to issuance of a building permit for the new home. This final plat is for conveyance purposes only. All street, storm, and streetlight public improvements have previously been constructed that are required for this site. Therefore, no additional public improvements will be required at this point. On-site detention is not mandatory because of the low impact of the development, because there are no known inadequacies within 1,000 feet downstream of the development. As part of the plat, the applicant will be dedicating an additional 15 feet of right-of-way along Clare Road for a total right-of-way width of 40 feet west of the center line, and this is shown and indicated on the plat. The applicant is also responsible for dedicating a 35-foot construction easement outside of the right-of-way. Basically, that will be in place for future construction of Clare Road at some unknown point in the future, and that is shown on the plat as well. Open space fees in the amount of $400 per residential lot shall be paid prior to the issuance of a building permit, and an open space fee will not be charged for the existing, for lot 1 that has the existing home on it. This development is also subject to provisions of SMC Chapter 12.26, which is the excise tax provision. The estimated excise tax for this development is $14,048.10. And the developer may enter into an excise tax abatement agreement with the city that would allow for the suspension of the excise tax, provided the final plat is recorded prior to expiration of the suspension of the excise tax as set by the city. As far as staff's recommendation goes, staff recommends approval of Z-09-19-10, rezoning from AG Agricultural to RS Residential Suburban for Campbell Family Estates, subject to the following condition. And that would be approval of the rezoning request by the governing body and publication of the ordinance in the official city newspaper as required by state law. Staff would also recommend approval of FP-13-19-10, final plat for Campbell Family Estates subdivision, generally located in 6120 Clare Road, subject to the 7 conditions as listed in the staff report. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mark. Is the applicant present? If you come forward, please, and state your name and address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Harold Phelps, Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas, and I am representing the Campbell family as well as Steve Campbell, which is in the audience as well.
Thank you. Are you in agreement with staff recommendations?
Yes, we are, and all stipulations.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? One question for staff to make sure is when they subdivide that out, the previous house that's on there, that does meet setback requirements, the way that's set up?
That is
I believe you said that.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
The existing home meets all the required setbacks for the residential suburban district.
The other thing is refresh my memory because quite frankly, I didn't read it as close as I should have. But we will have 2 entrances, for one entrance for each property?
That is correct. Each lot will be served by a private individual driveway.
Thank you, Mark.
The existing house will use the existing driveway, and then lot 2 with the new house will have a driveway towards the north end of lot 2.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Nanick?
Just curious, and not really an opinion one way or another on this motion, but would this allow for further subdividing of this property?
As it stands right now, he would not. They would have to come back through and replat the property if they were going to do that. With the properties being served by private septic systems instead of public sewers, they're required to have a minimum of 2 acres. So as it is today, they would not be allowed to further subdivide this property.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Braley?
Yeah, question for staff, and this is more just kind of a general education, but when you have a piece of property with, in this case, a pond that's going to be on there and there's going to be additional development in there, is there any concerns or requirements that they have to keep the pond at its same size, that it can't shrink? How is a body of water like this addressed in a property like this when kind of a development's going to occur?
Well, obviously, the pond could remain as it is, but I think the applicant can tell you that the pond's essentially dried up at this point.
Okay.
I believe they indicated they have no intentions of keeping it. He could address that, though, further. But they are not required to keep it. They could enlarge it, they could reduce it, they could, I mean, it's not up,
But in no
city
way-
regulations have no bearing on.
But in no way is it seen as any type of temporary retention for the general area for any runoff that occurs, because I see there's a pond just south of that as well, so we're not gonna run into any problems if that is removed,
Right.
that's gonna create any.
The
kind of-
engineer could address that,
Okay.
but I believe that is not the
Okay.
case.
Mr. Phelps, could you just kind of address that if you've looked at
Yeah,
it?
no, the intent right now would be to eliminate the pond. I think as Mark covered, our analysis showed no need for stormwater detention, so it will not be required for detention or any type of BMP.
Okay, and it doesn't fall in any kind of wetlands category or anything that we're losing any kind of wetlands by that? Okay, if it's dry, I guess.
That's correct. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you bet.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, that would put us into public hearing, as this is a zoning request. Does anybody from the public wish to comment on this? Seeing no one, then that's it, means the public comment period is over. We're in commission discussion. I'd prefer that it be two separate motions. That's leading us into, yes, Commissioner Wise.
And I'll make a motion to approve Z09-19-10 rezoning from agricultural to residential suburban for the Campbell Family Estate subdivision, subject to staff's conditions.
Is there a second? Commissioner Bingham. Thank you. A motion and a second to approve Z09-1910 rezoning. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. That leaves us with the second half of this. Commissioner Roth.
I recommend we approve FP-13-19-10 final plat of the Campbell Family Estates at 6120 Clare Road per staff's recommendations.
Is there a second? Commissioner Nenick.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve final plat 131910 Campbell Family Estates at 6120 Clare Road for final plat approval. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda, the City of Shawnee Comprehensive Plan Amendment discussion from Chapter 5, the Land Use Guide, and Chapter 8, Street Standards, Circulation Plan, and Transit Plan. Stephanie.
Thank you, Chairman. Stephanie Malmborg, Community Development Staff. Tonight, we just have a discussion. We're hoping that the Planning Commission can give staff some feedback about some proposed amendments that we have to update our comprehensive plan, which we do on an annual basis. We are anticipating having a public hearing on these amendments in December at either your first or second meeting in December, provided that we get direction tonight and don't have too long of a list of items to work on amending. So Lauren put together this great report about the amendments that have been on her mind for the downtown, and we also have, in addition to Chapter 5, the Land Use Guide, which is the meat of this report, if you will. Chapter 8, we also want to address something in the circulation plan that we would like to amend as well. So I'll go over this report very briefly, and if we could get some feedback on the ideas in this report, that would be very helpful moving forward. So the image you see on the screen here is what we consider the downtown area. This is primarily between Shawnee Mission Parkway and 55th Street, and then Quivira and Schweitzer, just to give you a general street boundary. The main thing we want to do here is look at all of the different studies that we've completed in the last, 15 or so years since we've updated the comprehensive plan for the downtown area. There's been 7 studies that we listed in the staff report that we want to incorporate information from. And it's a long overdue to kind of look at this downtown area and adjust some of the land uses we've called on here, because we have had a lot of developments, and you've seen them come in recently as well. A lot of new developments looking to come to the downtown, and the land use guide doesn't really reflect what the city's looking for on some of those properties. So we're thinking of developing a new land use category called the Town Square Mixed Use category. And Lauren's going to be working on identifying sort of how these different colors on your map would change to adjust to that new land use category. And it's going to be just like it sounds. We all know that there's a zoning district called Town Square, and we all know that we're looking for a mix of uses primarily along Johnson and Neiman, and getting to make sure that there's appropriate transitions between land uses in our downtown area as we go from more of those main street feels on Neiman and Johnson to the neighborhoods where we have single-family homes. Lauren did discuss this back in June with our downtown partnership, and they voiced the desire to create a new land use designation. So this is consistent with what the downtown partnership would like to see as well. The primary goals and objectives are implementing complete streets, creating more live, work, and play opportunities, increasing the placemaking and unique components of the area, and again, getting into incorporating those studies that we have done in the last few years. So the key components of this Town Square mixed-use land designation that we're looking at, we're looking to increase densities, make sure that we have room for residential infill projects, allow vertical and horizontal mixed uses, have appropriate transitions between land use intensities, orient new buildings toward the streets, have connectivity along the corridor and outside the downtown so we can bring people in as well, and look at streetscape. We also want to recognize that Johnson and Neiman have their own sort of look and feel. Johnson, Lauren termed as the central core, and Neiman as the transitional mixed-use area. So we want to make sure that we respect both of the development patterns that have kind of been occurring along those 2 different streets. And that's the main discussion point for the land use guide. And really quickly, let me go to circulation plan. I put together a graphic that's a little bit more clear than what's in the circulation plan.
Stephanie, excuse me, but would you like us to have questions while you're going through this, or do you want to go through the whole thing and then if we have questions?
I have about 30 more seconds on this slide.
I'm always just really bad with you, aren't I? My apologies.
No, it's okay. This is a really short one. So you see this orange line on the graphic here that was in your staff report? That shows what is currently on our circulation plan, and staff feels that we no longer need to worry about realigning Valentine Road, so we want to remove that from the circulation plan, and there will be no further road alignments between Valentine and 62nd here. That line will just go away. So we're not proposing to have that orange line on the plan anymore. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions for the staff? One of them is, are we able to define the difference in the feel and architecture on Neiman Road? I mean, is that just a feel or is there a boundary we're going to set that says once you get one block past Johnson Drive, then we want newer buildings? Is that a definitive street where that changes, or is it just by a feel?
I think we would go off of existing development patterns and analyze what we already have and then what we want to see. Just as an example, across the street here, we have a couple of the businesses that have those very traditional looking limestone buildings, and then we have buildings that transition to not using limestone, and whether or not we want to get that limestone look back or that masonry stone look back on those buildings, or we want to require that on new buildings, because that's kind of a Johnson Drive look, but it's not so much a Neiman look. So we can talk about the boundaries in which we want to see specific design materials, specific types of architecture, new versus old versus, refacing an existing building. We can get into as much or as little detail as you'd like. Some of it might be comprehensive plan related, some of it might be design guidelines related, though.
Thank you. Commissioner Peterson.
Forgive me for being blunt, but aren't we doing this backwards? We just talked about the downtown design guidelines several months ago, and now we're coming back and saying, okay, now we're going to rethink this. Are we actually looking at this under a microscope in just itty bitty little sections, or actually have we broadened the view? My deal is I think how far we go out, because if Johnson Drive looks like a 1930 downtown, but a block off Neiman can be whatever, it's not very much of a transition, and we seem very ambivalent about that. It doesn't seem, we say things like may and shall. Seems very wishy-washy to me. Do we even have a specific guide of where we're going to? This doesn't seem it.
So, and I'll let you piggyback on this, Doug, because I'm sure you probably have comments too. I think for the purposes of the comprehensive plan, we're looking mostly at land use patterns, but I think if we have suggestions specific to architecture and development, that's something we can further expand upon in the design guidelines.
Commissioner Wise.
Yeah, and to tag on to that is that, the downtown partnership with the design guides, they've also more or less outlined that boundary. It's somewhat defined, but the intent is that there's flexibility. They're guidelines, not rules, unfortunately. But they've already looked at that boundary to say how far past like Neiman and Johnson Drive you go. Doesn't mean you can't go further past that. But there, I believe that's in the design guides, or part of that is that boundary to make sure it is a more comprehensive look between Neiman and Johnson Drive.
Yeah, to follow up on that, Stephanie's right about the land use patterns you see. Anything beyond that would require rezoning if it's not zoned town square currently. But I think that the idea of this is to give an idea of, whether it's going to be a mixed use or if it's more appropriate for a straight residential type use with no retail. That's some of the different colors that you see on that map. As you get closer to Shawnee Mission Parkway, probably more appropriate for just strictly commercial type uses rather than residential type uses as you get closer to the east-west arterial. So this is more of a use planning study. There's always conversation in the comp plan in general terms about intensity and transitions. So to answer an earlier question, I could see that kind of giving the direction that taller buildings would be located up on the street frontage, transitioning to a lower height as you get closer to those single family areas. And the design guidelines are really a little bit more precise and are really in truth kind of separate from this, even though we reference them. I don't know if I can give you much more guidance.
I'm very aware that the two are completely separate entities, but we seem to be not dealing with them as a town square mixed use. If we're wanting to stamp this whole area with this availability, then those lines to me get very muddy. And it depends on the opinion of the day, not as a whole, this is what we're looking to do. And if that's what staff and Downtown Partnership wants to do, that's fine, because I'm one vote. But it just appears to me as if we're doing this in pieces and it's going to look very piecey.
I can maybe address that, is actually, and Stephen can attest to this, the first stab at this had a multitude of different colors all over the map, and it was more precise. And what came out of that discussion at the partnership level, at least, is that they wanted a little more flexibility in what could and could not be done. I think the idea with this map and this land use guide is to show, essentially, we're not showing single-family residential up against Neiman. You're getting a true urban core in the pink areas, supported by higher density residential on those fringe areas, and then transitioning to commercial on the north and south ends. It's a very general use at land use, look at land use, rather than trying to pinpoint specific areas. It may be that in terms of mixed use, based on the guidelines, there may be a proposal someday to do something right at the corner of Johnson and Neiman. And based on this map, mixed use is what we would want to go there. And so that's kind of the idea of this land use guide, is to really kind of show just in generality what we think the uses should be in terms of the individual parcels.
Commissioner Peterson, does that answer your questions? Keep going if it doesn't.
Well enough. My other question is, several years ago, we approved the cottage availability for infills, and it was specifically, I believe, for the town square. Is that still being incorporated, or was that, am I mistaken, and it was actually broader?
The smaller zoning that we incorporated was actually called R1A, and that was more in the low density areas, the yellow areas that you see. Most of those areas today are zoned R1. There are some infill areas that would be more appropriate. Large parcels that could maybe be split into two or three lots. So those are really a little bit further off of the downtown area. Again, those would require public hearing, zoning, and there's specific design guidelines for those as well.
Commissioner Brayley.
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand, so more towards Shawnee Mission Parkway where we're seeing the red and then kind of creeping down Neiman Road, that red is intended for more commercial. Okay, so with that as a zoning sort of guideline, I guess, are we locking in to that? And I only say this just looking into the future, if we see great success along Neiman Road and more people wanting to live in this area in higher density, are we saying that that is not going to occur? We're not going to be open to that occurring further down towards Shawnee Mission Parkway, because that's a major transportation thoroughfare, and if people are looking for more public transportation and you're getting closer to that public transportation, is that, so I guess that's...
Basically, that use closer to Shawnee Mission Parkway reflects the lane width of Neiman in that area. The first thing you learn in planning school is the comprehensive plan, future land use guide is not etched in stone.
Yeah.
It's a flexible document. That's why we review it every year. So if the thought of the planning commission, the city council is that you had some residential that you'd like, and that it fit within the context of those red areas, the map can be amended. And so I would say it's not set, fixed in stone.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
Chairman, if I may.
Yes, Stephanie.
Just to add on to your question and Doug's response, you can see actually one of the issues we're going to be addressing is in that red area, because our Neiman Catalyst site is currently classified in the red color, which is just commercial. And if you've seen any of the presentations so far about the Catalyst site, I know it hasn't made it to Planning Commission yet, it's a mixed-use site. We're calling for mixed use as far as the zoning goes, as far as the guidelines go, but we have not updated the actual land use category that underlies on this comprehensive plan. So those are the types of things we're looking to address.
Any other questions for the staff? Any other comments? So to proceed from here then, then you're asking if we're okay with the suggestions that staff and downtown partnerships has made. And at that point in time, would you suggest we set a public hearing, or are we going to go through this again after these changes are made? It sounds like there's agreement or understanding of what you're doing. So at that point in time, do you want us to set a public meeting now?
So understanding that this is the existing map, we have not made a new map with the proposed land uses and the changes and labels and all of the nitty-gritty details. If you agree with what was written in the staff report as far as incorporating those ideas, those studies into a new map and into new verbiage for the comprehensive plan, we'd like to move forward with setting a date at either of your December meetings for a public hearing on those changes. But not necessarily choose one of the dates, but just the permission, I think, to proceed, because we want to make sure we're having both of those meetings, because we know holidays sometimes get in the way.
Very fine. Is the commission comfortable without seeing the new maps with going forward on this? Doug, Mr. Allman, please.
I would suggest you just continue this discussion until the first meeting in November. Possibly we could have some at least draft changes to the land use guide, have an update to the circulation plan. I know I've had some conversation with some of the residents wanting some clarification on the description of Ballantyne. What we would do is bring back the entire circulation map that reflects the entire city. There may be some other portions of it that would even be looked at in terms of street connectivity and those kind of things. But I would suggest we just hold off, and then we could set the public hearing actual date. You guys authorize us at that meeting of the 4th. We could then plan on it for December, the late meeting in December. If that meeting ended up getting canceled, we could continue that to January. We're in the review process in this calendar year. Extending it past into the next year is not a big deal.
Very fine then. Commissioner Peterson.
Can I ask that when you propose the new, whatever, it's like almost like telling my age, overview of drawings such as, okay, this is what it is. This is what we would like it to look like. But other things that I would like to see are like trailhead accesses, because, putting commercial right next to where, you can jump on the bike path or the walking path is just to put all of the elements together, proposed pocket parks. The more information will be beneficial to, I think, more than just me.
I think that's a great idea. If you guys remember past years when we've done this, we usually have a circular blow up of former and proposed. And we'll do that. Obviously, there might not be a bunch of those because we're looking at kind of just the downtown area, but trail connectivity and those kind of things are pretty easy to throw in there. We could throw in our master trail plan, and, obviously we've got improvements that are under construction now along Neiman Road. Kind of maybe even give you a little refresher on what the look and feel of that's going to be at full design, because there's some of you that are new. Yeah. And so if you're comfortable with that, we'll provide you more information. We'll kind of, probably not a real professional word, but mapify the text that is in the report and go from there. Have more discussion in the first meeting of November, and then hopefully you'll allow us to set a public hearing for either, actually if we did that in the 4th, the 30-day period, we could either do the first meeting or the last meeting in December. So
could you also add the codes for the different colors of the mixed use guide? Because I still can't figure out what the hell the brown one is on there, and I'm sorry, I don't know.
Those colors may be changing based on the verbiage too.
You're changing colors on us too?
New color.
We don't like change much around here, you know that. That'd be fine. Anybody have any other questions or comments for the staff?
And if you want clarification on that Valentine issue, I probably could give it in 30 seconds. So that alignment of that road actually, I'm guessing, probably predates my tenure with the city. There was a proposal back in the late 90s called the Gateway Project, where there was going to be some homes possibly purchased or taken out of the floodplain. And so there was thought that there'd be a redevelopment effort in there. That plan is no longer valid. The city's actually spent money to improve the south side of 62nd Street. There's connectivity now from a bridge across the drainage channel for bike and ped. There's a sidewalk on the south side of 62nd that connects to a sidewalk on Goddard. So the alignment of that road is actually problematic for the people in that neighborhood, because if you want to sell your house, and there's about 4 houses or more that are impacted by that line, people get a little hinky about buying a house that has a line, future road drawn through it. So in our opinion, that ship has sailed, and so we'll just be removing that and going back to a traditional, it'll basically just be a local residential street as it is today.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. So proceed from here.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Willoughby.
I move we adjourn.
Oh, no, not so soon.
It's time.
We haven't asked if the staff has anything else for us. So the staff will proceed with this and bring it to one of the meetings. We'll set a public meeting after that. Does the staff have anything else for the commission? Does the commission have anything for staff? Commissioner Braley.
I apologize to Mr. Willoughby for this additional comment, but passing on to staff, when we talk about complete streets, and I don't know if it was meant as a summary, but it was stated walking, but I want to make sure that when we're talking about complete streets, we're talking about walking, cycling, automobiles, and then one of the other things that I think is going to be key to be thinking about on Neiman Road as we're increasing the density is delivery. So as we have businesses and trucks that are going to be showing up to make deliveries along that corridor, how is that going to be addressed? Trash, pickup, all those kinds of things that, I just want to make sure we're keeping in mind when we have to do with complete streets. Because, again, you get a couple of early deliveries in the morning and trucks parking on Neiman Road, kind of clogging some things up. We just want to make sure we're on the forefront of that. And then as a cyclist, I certainly don't like to have my bike lane blocked up by a delivery truck as well. So if we can just make sure moving forward that anytime we're talking complete streets, we understand it's complete and it's all users of that street and how they're going to interact. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Commissioner Braley, that's a very good point, because one of the things, there are areas in the city where they cannot take a tractor trailer rig down the street. And I'm not sure and I'm sure if you address that, we'll be able to know whether that might be something we need to consider, that actually 10-wheeler is as big a truck that can go into that area. So if that's addressed, a very good point, Commissioner Braley. Thank you. Commissioner Willoughby.
I'm done. Get somebody else.
All right.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Wise.
I'll second the motion.
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passed. We're done. Thank you.